and red would be a stop sign. Green represents units that have been attrited below 50% strength. The yellow are units that are between 50 and 75% strength, and of course the red are units that are over 75% strength. What we did, of course, was start an extensive air campaign, and I briefed you in quite some detail on that in the past. One of the purposes I told you at that time of that extensive air campaign was to isolate the Kuwaiti theater of operation by taking out all the bridges and supply lines that ran between the north and the southern part of Iraq. That was to prevent reinforcement and supply coming into the southern part of Iraq and the Kuwaiti theater of operation. We also conducted a very heavy bombing campaign, and many people questioned why the extensive bombing campaign. This is the reason why. It was necessary to reduce these forces down to a strength that was that made them weaker, particularly along the front line barrier that we had to go through. We continued our heavy operations out in the sea because we wanted the Iraqis to continue to believe that we were going to conduct a massive amphibious operation in this area. And I think many of you recall the number of amphibious rehearsals we had, to include Imminent Thunder, that was written about quite extensively for many reasons. But we continued to have those operations because we wanted him to concentrate his forces, which he did. I think this is probably one of the most important parts of the entire briefing I could talk about. As you know, very early on, we took out the Iraqi Air Force. We knew that he had very, very limited reconnaissance means, and therefore when we took out his Air Force, for all intents and purposes, we took out his ability to see what we were doing down here in Saudi Arabia. Once we had taken out his eyes, we did what could best be described as the Hail Mary play in football. I think you recall when the quarterback is desperate for a touchdown at the very end, what he does is he steps up behind the center, and all of a sudden every single one of his receivers goes way out to one flank, and they all run down the field as fast as they possibly can and into the end zone, and he lobs the ball. In essence, that's what we did. When we knew that he couldn't see us anymore, we did a massive movement of troops all the way out to the west, to the extreme west, because at that time we knew that he was still fixed in this area with the vast majority of his forces, and once the air campaign started, he would be incapable of moving out to counter this move, even if he knew we made it. There were some addition of troops out in this area, but they did not have the capability nor the time to put in the barrier that had been described by Saddam Hussein as an absolutely impenetrable tank barrier that no one would ever get through. I believe those were his words. So this was absolutely an extraordinary move, I must tell you. I can't recall any time in the annals of military history when this number of forces have moved over this distance to put themselves in a position to be able to attack. But what's more important, and I think it's very, very important that I make this a point, and that's these logistics bases. Not only did we move the troops out there, but we literally moved thousands and thousands of tons of fuel, of ammunition, of spare parts, of water, and of food out here into this area, because we wanted to have enough supplies on hand so that if we launched this and we got into a slugfest battle, which we very easily could have gotten into, we'd have enough supplies to last for 60 days. It was an absolutely gigantic accomplishment, and I can't give credit enough to the logisticians and the transporters who were able to pull this off, to the superb support we had from the Saudi government, the literally thousands and thousands of drivers, really of every national origin, who helped us in this move out here. And of course, great credit goes to the commanders of these units who were also able to maneuver their forces out here and put them in this position. But as a result, by the 23rd of February, what you found is this situation. The front lines had been attrited down to a point where all of these units were at 50% or below. The second level, basically, that we had to face, and these were the real tough fighters that we were worried about right here, were attrited to someplace between 50 and 75%, although we still had the Republican Guard located here, and part of the Republican Guard in this area that were very strong, and the Republican Guard up in this area strong. And we continued to hit the bridges all across this area to make absolutely sure that no more reinforcements came into the battle. This was a situation on the 23rd of February. Next, please. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I shouldn't forget these fellows. That SF stands for Special Forces. We put special forces deep into the enemy territory. They went out on strategic reconnaissance for us, and they let us know what was going on out there, and they were the eyes that were out there, and very important that I not forget those folks. Next, please. This then was the morning of the 24th. Our plan initially had been to start over here in this area and do exactly what the Iraqis thought we were going to do, and that's take them on head-on into their most heavily defended area. Also, at the same time, we launched amphibious feints and naval gunfire in this area so that they continued to think that we were going to be attacking along this coast and therefore fix their forces in this position. Our hope was that by fixing the forces in this position and with this attack through here in this position, we would basically keep the forces here and they wouldn't know what was going on out in this area. And I believe we succeeded in that very well. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the Marines, the 1st Marine Division and the 2nd Marine Division, launched attacks through the barrier system. They were accompanied by the the Tiger Brigade, U.S. Army Tiger Brigade of the 2nd Armored Division. At the same time over here, 2 Saudi task forces also launched a penetration through this barrier. But while they were doing that, at 4 o'clock in the morning over here, the 6th French Armored Division, accompanied by a brigade of the 82nd Airborne, also launched an overland attack to their objective up in this area, Al Salman Airfield. And we were held up a little bit by the weather, but by 8 o'clock in the morning, the 101st Airborne Air Assault launched an air assault deep in the enemy territory to establish a forward operating base in this location right here. Let me talk about each one of those moves. First of all, the Saudis over here on the East Coast did a terrific job. They went up against a very, very tough barrier system. They breached the barrier very, very effectively. They moved out aggressively and continued their attack up the coast. I can't say enough about the 2 Marine divisions. If I use words like brilliant, it would really be an under-description of the absolutely superb job that they did in breaching the so-called impenetrable barrier. It was a classic, absolutely classic military breaching of a very, very tough minefield, barbed wire, fire trenches type barrier. They went through the first barrier like it was water. They went across into the 2nd barrier line. Even though they were under artillery fire at the time, they continued to open up that breach, and then they brought both divisions streaming through that breach. Absolutely superb operation, a textbook, and I think it'll be studied for many, many years to come as the way to do it. I would also like to say that the French did an absolutely superb job of moving out rapidly to take their objective out here, and they were very, very successful, as was the 101st. And again, we still had the special forces located in this area. What we found was as soon as we breached these obstacles here and started bringing pressure, we started getting a large number of surrenders. And I think I talked to some of you all about that this evening when I briefed you on the evening of the 24th. We found we got a large number of surrenders. We also found that these forces right here were getting a large number of surrenders and were meeting with a great deal of success. We were worried about the weather. The weather turned out was going to get pretty bad the next day, and we were worried about launching this air assault. And we also started to have a huge number of atrocities of really the most unspeakable type committed in downtown Kuwait City, to include reports that the desalinization plant had been destroyed. And when we heard that, we were quite concerned about what might be going on. Based upon that and the situation as it was developing, we made a decision that rather than wait the following morning to launch the remainder of these forces, that we would go ahead and launch those forces.
If you've just joined us, we're watching the commander of the Allied forces in the Middle East, General Norman Schwarzkopf, at a briefing explaining the strategy of the land war up to the present moment. This strategy briefing coming live from Saudi Arabia.
In this area.